Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby Blog. I am Cammy Black. It's our Scotland, South Africa, and Scotland, Japan preview podcasts. We might be a little bit late on the Scotland, Japan preview because we've scheduled this for 1 o'clock on a Friday, hoping that the women's team will have been announced by now, but it hasn't. So we're gonna park that to the end of the podcast. If during this podcast that team's announced, then we can go into more detail. If not, we can do a little general preview. Scotland, South Africa. Then, John, we've got the Scotland team. It's fair to say there was a few surprises in there.
Yeah, I think that would be that that would be a fair suggestion. It was again. Why do we even try to predict Townsend anymore? Why do we think we can do this? We can't. He's mercurial.
Yeah. I think that's it's, and it's
you
not
threw
like,
that word around an awful lot, John. I tell you.
Do you know? I'm taking that word back because all of those folks that have, all those journalists that have claimed it and used it, I'm taking it back. This is my new mercurial. That I'm taking back the M word.
Yeah, it's a strange one, Craig, because I don't think there's been any news that any of these are particularly injury forced. I think that we're guessing the Sam Johnson one is, but they haven't said it is. So
No.
that would indicate that the plan has always been for Matt Scott to play at 12, which seems, I don't know, there's obviously a plan there.
There has to be, and it's either injury and they're just keeping it quiet, or because if you showed me that 12 months ago, I may have said, well, they're bringing Matt Scott in at 12 because he's a strike runner and he's heavy, and he's a lot stronger than Sam Johnson and this, that, and the other. But actually, well, considering he sparked out an Australian prop in the last game, he's not lacking in strike running ability. So there's not a lot I can really say apart from the fact that Matt Scott is ripping it up, and we obviously needed some stronger players in the lineup. So so we thought we'd bring in some ex-Edinburgh or Edinburgh players for that.
Oh, John, I'll let you respond. I'll let you respond in time, John. What I will say though is we did have a debate in the group chat about this when it came out, and obviously Rory, editor of the blog, is absolutely delighted that Matt Scott's in the squad he's been calling for a long time. I think Matt Scott is unlucky that he went to Gloucester, had a bit of a renaissance down in Gloucester, came up to Edinburgh, did very well, and has now gone at Leicester, and by all accounts is doing incredibly well. The problem that Matt Scott has had is when he went to Gloucester, Scotland all of a sudden got a load of options at centre. So he went down the pecking order, not for a lack of ability, and he's come back to Edinburgh, really pushed his way in, but he was pushing against a closed door, I think, because we just had so many different options. Now I think it's who just if Sam Johnson is injured, then actually Matt Scott's not a bad option, and maybe that's testament to him, John. And I'm going to make you say something nice about Matt Scott. It's testament to Matt Scott that he, that he's in there, that he's worked, he has played his way back in to the Scotland starting lineup.
I think you're absolutely right. It is testament to Matt Scott that he's persevered because he has been in a few squads and hasn't got much game time. And the question has always been, why is Matt Scott not getting a chance? And I think, right, so I had my initial toys at the pram moment, and then I read some of the pressers and stuff. And you know what? Yeah, the Autumn International's okay, fine. If he is going to feature at all for Scotland in the run-up, Six Nations, up to World Cup, then yeah, this is a massive opportunity. And I think it is last chance saloon for him. I think if you don't see much from him, then I think he'll probably be put out to pasture a wee bit at that point. I would argue, I take your point regarding the depth at centre, but actually the depth at centre was at 13. And Matt Scott's always kind of been considered to be able to play both. And I do wonder if there has been a little bit of a shift in mentality from him to say more like, I'll consider myself more of a 12 than a 13. Because Scotland maybe haven't been as stacked at 12. You know, we were relying on Pete Horne there for a long time. Sam Johnson kind of came out of, you know, he sort of qualified on residency, and we all went, all right, okay, I suppose I'll give him a shot. And, you know, we have had a lot of depth at 13. So I think, you know, I've got no problem with Matt Scott running at 12. We'll see what we get out of him. I don't necessarily think if it is a tactical switch, it's a smart one, but I think Sam Johnson has been rumoured to be carrying a few niggles and knocks here and there, and has played a lot of rugby this season already. So, you know, yeah, let's see how we go. I've calmed down.
Craig, the Gregor Townsend's quote seemed to be indicating that Matt Scott's in there because he maybe is a stronger link player. That's the role he's been playing at Leicester. That his distribution's good, his kick chase is good. He's maybe less of a, although he's got the ability to be a direct runner, but he's got maybe a little bit more to his game. That the quote also kind of said, "We're throwing him in there to see what happens, and hopefully it'll go well," which seems a very Gregor Townsend approach to selecting a squad.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I think everyone seems to be all the pundits, all the Twitterati seem to be going off on one about the changes that have been made. But if you actually think about it, remember, it's an autumn international. It's not, okay, it's the world champions that are coming up, and it's going to be a massive force. It's going to be a really interesting game. We've not, we're wanting to beat them, etc. But also, we're not going to win anything out of this. So if Matt Scott's knocking on the door and he throws him in to let Matt Scott have a go, then that's great. The other person that is obviously winning at this is Rufus McLean. He's getting his chance as well against the world champions. Now, don't get me wrong, he deserves it, but he's getting a chance, and I think that's the other thing to think about,
Yeah, ahead of Darcy as well, John, which is, again, we don't know whether there's an indication Darcy's picked up a niggle. This just seems to be Darcy had his chance against Australia, and Rufus is getting his chance against South Africa.
Yeah, again, there had been some mutterings of potential injury. Darcy has he's had a rough couple of weeks, hasn't he? He's been battered about a bit, but no indication of injury. So you have to then presume it's a plan. You would maybe argue South African game plan at a best guess will involve the ball being up in the air a lot more. Perhaps, Rufus McLean slightly taller, but not, again, you wouldn't call him an aerial specialist by any stretch. So I was surprised, but I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes, and this could be a real coming of age game for Rufus McLean. If he goes well the weekend, I reckon you're starting to see him very, very, very hard pressed to not be asking questions of the first team and getting a game regularly, because he's got all the talent.
I suppose, the interesting thing then is that if we go to the forwards, that we've got Nick Haining coming in at 6 and Hamish Watson. I don't want to say dropping to the bench, because I don't think that's like in modern rugby. You've got your 23 players and that's your team. It's not necessarily the starting 15, but it would indicate that Scotland are going to try and front up to South Africa with having a bigger pack. I don't want to say, people have pulled me up because I said, they bring on more mobile players afterwards. I didn't mean, I think all I was kind of meaning was that clearly it's a bigger pack we're starting with. Not that Hamish Watson's lightweight, but the plan then is to bring Hamish Watson on to wreak havoc when the game's breaking up. One, with his carrying, and also just to kind of try and compete for the ball at the breakdown. It's I don't know. It's an interesting back row, I think.
Yeah, I think Tooney's gone to the old school 6 again, and he's put some big lump in at 6. And no disrespect to Nick Haining, I'm not meaning that in the wrong way, but they're bringing him in. He also gives, you've now got Jamie Ritchie, Nick Haining, Grant Gilchrist, Sam Skinner, who can all be lifted in the line out. and they're all tall lads, you know, because you're looking at there's some monsters in the line out, especially when you look at the team that was announced. So I think I'm not surprised by it. Yes, okay, Mish is, you know, the Six Nations player of the championship. He's a British and Irish line, etc. But you play the team to the plan that you have, and obviously Nick Haining is there. I kind of would have probably have preferred to seen Hodgson go into second row and maybe put Sam Skinner in at 6, and then you've got the ability to replace a second rower with Sam Skinner if need be. But there's obviously a plan, so they're happy to go.
I guess because I was working that through, and I think we were working that through in the group chat, and I think, John, that means that effectively you're asking all your locks then to play a full 80 minutes, and that's maybe why Haining comes in at 6 rather than Skinner, because if Hodgson starts, Skinner's in the back row, then you end up with, you either have to stick another lock on the bench or another back rower, in which case, you kind of, it's a bit piecemeal, I suppose, if injuries start to.
Yeah, it is, and I like you, Craig. I here we go. This is one for the fans here. I originally agreed with your point regarding Skinner, and I certainly would have preferred him to be at 6 rather than Haining. But actually, when you walk through the logic, it's fair enough. I think the concern for me, there's been whisperings about Hamish Watson's fitness. He's not played, he hadn't played any rugby until coming back, and seemed to have taken quite a knock as well at the weekend, was hobbling about a bit, and there was kind of suggestions that it was a case of, we'll bring him on at 60 and we'll let him loose, but he's probably not fit for to start. And your concern is, and I always reflect back on I think it was the Wales game, Six Nations a few years ago, where you had Hamish Watson and John Hardy competing for the 7 jersey, and Hardy was just back from injury, and everyone was shocked that he started. And actually, the logic was, start, and if you break yourself within 3 minutes, right, the game plan's shifted, but we're going to have to ask a boy to play the full game when they probably wouldn't have. But we're not any worse off. Whereas the other way about, it's a problem because he could have come on as a sub and broke himself within a minute. So my concern would be, just if Watson isn't fit, I would always say if a player's kind of struggling with injury or isn't fit to play the full match, start them and get as much out of them as you can before they, to mitigate that risk. But obviously there's game plan with Hamish Watson because, in Townsend we trust.
Yeah. The again, and the Townsend talks a little bit about the game plan, and there does seem to be an indication, Craig, that Scotland are going to try be in it for the first 60 minutes, and then the game plan is to then unleash hell by bringing on George Horne, Adam Hastings, and presumably shifting Finn Russell out to 12 and getting full cats at a rave.
Well, that seems to be the way. Well, it seems to be the way. I think if you're looking at the forwards pack, etc., I think it seems to be that they're going to try and, instead of matching South Africa fully across the 15, they're going to try and match and play South Africa with their pack, and then absolutely go for it in the back line. And I think, just as you say, Cats in the Rave will be on the field. They've got to be on the field at some point. He's had them on the field against Australia. You may as well bring them out against South Africa, especially with Yantes, the Yantes brothers. Are they the brothers?
No, they're not. They're not related,
they're not brothers.
Actually.
No, they're not related. But at 9 and 10, Elton he's a good player, but he can be a little bit fragile as such, and so if he's getting a lot of pressure from Matt Scott and from Finn, etc., then once we bring on the runners and the kickers in the last 20 minutes, you might find we've got an advantage.
Yeah. Somebody asking on Facebook, they've not told us who it is because not given Facebook permission, but have said, do you think Shuey and Zander are going to be kept on for 65 plus? I think that's an interesting question. I don't particularly feel, against Australia, the scrum didn't I think it was like terrible once. But Jamie Batty and Ollie Kebble did a good enough job. I know it's South Africa. I know they've got a really good bench when it comes to the front row, but I think we'll just see how they go. Really, I mean, you win something, you lose something with bringing your pack off the bench, but
I think because South Africa's bench is so strong, it's all the more likely that you would probably be looking to, as we bench match, because with best, unless it's in unless the stats are all saying that Schumann and Zander are scrummaging harder and stronger after 65 minutes than Kebble and Batty, which I would highly doubt. Whilst they are better scrummagers, I would highly doubt that after 65 minutes against South Africa, they would be able to scrummage as well as a fresh pair of legs from they two. So I think you'll see it'll be when South Africa go, we go, but it'll not be before then.
Yeah. You've also got to look at the fact that you look how many scrums we had against Australia, and I think the game plan is to not, they might not be using the scrums as much as they as maybe they used to. So you might find that they'll try and outplay the scrums by 50-22s and stuff like that, and we'll wait and see.
Yeah. I just want to do that very quickly. It's Ian Wallace who says, CEO of the King Blair Horn fan club. That's the one thing I think on the bench. Now, I'm controversial, and I know I've got in trouble from Craig and others about the King Blair Horn views before. I'm not. Scotland have left players on the bench before, and I wonder whether or not he's there as a break glass in case of emergency sub, because he can cover so many roles, because he can cover the back. You can cover wing, back 3 and 10 and possibly 13 according to Gregor Townsend as well. But part of me does wonder whether or not, I'm not sure we'll see him at the weekend unless he's needed, and that's not been unusual, Craig, for Scotland to do that in the past.
I've seen George Horne sit on the bench for a whole game. And as frustrating as it may be, that's the way it sometimes plays out. It's difficult. It depends. I'm going to say this, and I know you'll shoot me down, John. But if the occasion overtakes Rufus McLean, then he's got someone who's a well-capped player for Scotland, an international player who can come on, and I don't think it'll happen, but if it does happen,
and you're not wrong. I'm not going to shoot you down for that. I don't think it will happen, but it could happen.
It could happen, and then there's also the other side of things of. Hoggy's not been lighting my fire lately, so and I'm not saying that Blair Kinghorn is anywhere. I'm not saying he's a direct Hoggy replacement, but what you might find is that he's got the abilities that he can come on 15 if Hoggy just keeps running into trouble. And I like the fact that Blair Kinghorn has the ability to get his hands and the ball around a player, whereas I find Hoggy doesn't. When he goes into contact, and a lot of the times he gets himself caught and the ball's turned over because he doesn't take players with him. Whereas Blair Kinghorn has that ability to go into the contact and get the ball offloaded. Sometimes maybe not the greatest offload, and Hamish Watson will tell you that. But we'll attest to that. But
I think, and we've talked about that on the podcast before. That there's a lot of Stuart Hogg, I think, will occasionally try and overplay things. Yeah. And I think because he's got faith in his own ability, which is great. And I'm not saying that Blair Kinghorn doesn't have faith in his own ability, but I think because he's not the same stature as Stuart Hogg, he maybe is more open to passing or not just running into contact and hoping he can step a couple of guys and get through them. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
There's not a chance in hell they're going to take Stuart Hogg off at any point during the South Africa game unless it's injury forced. Let's be honest. He's the captain. He's the best player except Finn Russell.
Speaking of captains, though, I think it's really important, see how the game's managed this weekend, because we know with South Africa, we saw against the Lions, we've seen against other teams that if South Africa are allowed to have lots of water breaks, and that's not about the water cars coming on the pitch, but just if they're allowed to have lots of rests and lots of set pieces, South Africa are going to win the game. But if Scotland can keep the ball moving, can keep the pace up, can manage the referee to do that, and have when there are set pieces and there are breakdowns, that there's not too many, and that the things are moved on quickly. Craig, I'll go with you on that.
It's going to be difficult. I with the captains, Hoggy. The problem we have, and I keep saying, I've never really been a big fan of a 15 as a captain, and so I'm a forward. So I like a forward captain. So I've always been a forward. I do believe, and I'm backing Jamie Ritchie. I like the cut of Jamie Ritchie's jib. He really has developed a lot of play. We had a fair bit of chat about Jamie Ritchie being, you have to watch him because he's got quite a bit of niggle. He's got this, that, and the other. I've seen a different Jamie Ritchie over the last couple of games. He's still got the oomph. He's still got the in your face, but he's just not that in your face. He's not losing it as much. So I think. I don't know. It's Hoggy's captain. Hoggy will continue to be captain. But as I said before in the pod last week, I would be quite interested to see if Jamie Ritchie becomes captain for the World Cup, even though Ian disagrees with him.
Yeah. I think it was in the expectation. We were talking about expectations again in the group chat, and obviously I think we need to raise our expectations for this game. I think before, as Scotland fans would maybe expect, we beat one big team every couple of years, but I think now the expectations are we should be competing with the big teams every autumn. And my expectation, John, for this game is we should finish within a score, one way or the other.
I mean, I think that's a fair expectation based on where we are. Initially, my reaction was different, and I'm still quite worried. Actually, I think the game plan's a risk, right? The way we've set ourselves up is a risk. I think there's a couple of key positions that we might get overwhelmed quite quickly in, and if that happens, South Africa could and probably should run away from us, and it could be a 2-score game quite easily. I'm obviously hoping that doesn't happen, but I've got that horrible niggling feeling. We've had the horrible optimism that we've had over the last while, and all that comes with that. And now I've got that kind of gut feeling that, I think South Africa are going to win. I think we're going to end up with our bubble popped a wee bit here.
Craig, are you any more optimistic?
I think it's going to be a score. I think it's going to be a Scotland score. I think having Matt Scott, he's not the be-all and end-all with the defence, but I think our defence is far better than it used to be. And I think if Tooney can play what he wanted, what I can guarantee he wanted to play with against them in the Lions series, and we can search for the space, we can push them with the kicks, because we've got we've got 3 or 4 kickers in the back line that can really test the box. I honestly think we've got an opportunity to at least beat them by a score. I'm fairly positive about it. So I would go down the route of a Scotland win.
Yeah, I'm with you, Craig. I'm expecting Scotland to win. I'm not as pessimistic as I used to be about Scotland's chances. I think it's the way that the team celebrated at the weekend. I think I sent a message through to you on the pod.
Yeah, we mentioned it on the pod as well.
It wasn't sinking to the knees, screaming tears in the. I know Hugh Ashman was obviously emotional because it's his debut, but it was really workmanlike. Well done, lads. We've been Australia. Want the next game kind of attitude, which I think that's a massive mindset change in Scotland. So I think our defence has come on leaps and bounds. It's going to be a real test for Scotland because it's not the best South Africa team, but it's a really good one compared to the Australia team. Yeah. It's not the South Africa B by any stretch. It's like a South Africa with a couple of key people missing, as opposed to Australia, who I think missed quite a lot of key positions. This is a real test for Scotland and to see where they are. We have got the Scotland women's squad, just very briefly. Incredibly strong lineup. We've got Leah Bartlett, Lana Skeldon, Christine Belzile, Emma Wassell, Sarah Bonner, Rachel Malcolm, Rachel McClellan, Jade Conkle, Jenny Maxwell, Helen Nelson, Megan Gaffney, Lisa Thompson, Hannah Smith, Rona Lloyd, and Chloe Rowley. I think it's safe to say that Brian Easton is not effing about with this one. Craig, I mean, Japan got well beaten by Wales. I think it was last weekend. Last time they played Scotland, it was 24-20 to Japan at Scotstoun in front of an empty stadium. And this is, it's interesting because Scotland have been together now for a while now. They've had that time in the World Cup qualifier, and they've spent a lot of time in camp together. So this is going to be a really interesting test of where Scotland women are, because Japan are 12th in the world, I think, and they're very ambitious as a nation for women's rugby, I think, and rugby in general. So this is a really good test for Scotland, I think, because they can compare. I suppose they can compare to how Wales have played against. They've got something to compare against with how Wales performed against Japan.
Yeah. I would. Looking at the squad that you just read out, and this is an ideal opportunity to have a feel good game, score some points, score some nice tries, and really push Japan hard. Japan will have a little bit of insider knowledge because they've now got Louise Dalglish as their assistant coach, who was involved with Scotland, and obviously she's gone over there to advance her coaching career, and it's a great move for her. But so she knows the players very, very well. So it'll be interesting to see how Japan front up against the Scotland players. But I would expect a win, and a good win from Scotland.
Yeah, John, you agree with that? Good win for Scotland?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny just the difference that seeing a selection makes, and just seeing that consistency, seeing. If you're playing teams, picking your best players tends to be a good way to win games. So I really, really hope that, I can see them doing really well.
Good. I'd like to spend more time on that, but I've just literally looked at my phone, and the team have been announced for 10 minutes whilst popped up. So I don't have more time to kind of do much more reading other than see how Japan have done recently. So we'll cover that though on the podcast on Wednesday. We'll obviously that's going to be live on BBC Alba. If you want, I think still tickets are left for the Dam Stadium. If you want to do that, I think it's £1 for kids as well, which is obviously a very good deal. So we'll be back on Wednesday with a review of the South Africa game, and we will have a review of the Scotland v Japan as well. I am rapidly running out of battery here, so I don't want to be cut off unnecessarily and just leave Craig hanging, because we've already lost John Anderson.
He's already lost John, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's it for this week. Like I said, John's back. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Acast, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else you get your podcast apps. We're going to do these little preview podcasts during the autumn tests. You can also sign up to the patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast. You get an extra weekly podcast where we talk about wider issues other than Scottish rugby and go on for about another hour from the normal podcast, which people seem to enjoy. So that's £3 a month if you want to sign up for that as well. But for the moment, it is goodbye from me and goodbye from John and Craig.
Bye folks.